Kelly. I'm currently a supporter and liaison for the e-board, and assistance for the board of directors and the elections committee. Today we'll be having a Q&A session dedicated to Anthony Tran, the candidate for treasurer. So we will begin our Q&A for Anthony. As a reminder, Anthony, you will have 90 seconds to respond to a common question. So I will also place the question to the chat for you. There is a bit of leeway for you to finish your thoughts, but if you don't conclude after, you will reach a hard stop. So yeah, so let's start. UNAVSA has always had a fluctuation of funds to sustain itself as an organization. What do you think? What do you think UNAVSA should focus on in the next 2 years? And what do you think would be the most important financially as an organization? To follow up, how would you deliver on this focus? And what are some challenges?
Yes. Having worked on the UNAVSA conference the past 2 years, I've heard and seen a lot about the, as you mentioned, fluctuation of funds. So I believe that what UNAVSA should focus on in the next 2 years is figuring out a way to maintain a more financially stable source of revenue. And of course, this past year, our sponsorship team has done an amazing job reaching out for sponsors. And of course, I would want to continue that within the next 2 years. But also, I know they've done some grant writing the past 2 years, but I do want to put a bit more emphasis and focus on getting grants for us, because I think that'll also be a big help to continuing to bring in revenue for the organization so that we can maintain the programs that we have in place right now. Yeah, that was kind of how I would deliver on that. I know in my application, I had stated that I do have a goal of getting at least one grant applied for each quarter. So I want to focus on that, and hopefully sponsorship committee can help out there as well. Of course, we're going to continue reaching out to businesses and community members for sponsorships. And I think the one other thing that I would want to mention is that, especially given the financial hardships of this past conference, definitely do want to make sure going forward we do a deeper dive into the bid packets for future conferences and make sure that everything is financially sound and reasonable before invest too much into it. Yeah, so those are what I want to focus on and work towards for the next few terms. Of course, difficulties, as we've seen this past year, challenges would be finding people to reach out to that would be willing and able to sponsor and support our organization. So a lot of the challenge will be on me and the sponsorship team to not just reach out, but also to find the sponsors themselves, which this past year we've definitely had a lot of help from our conference team. And yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you, Anthony, for your answer. That was very thorough. So the next question we have for you is, UNAVSA conference in the past 15 conferences made a surplus half of the time. That means that the other half lost money. How would you address this considering that costs are rising?
It's definitely a tough one. As I mentioned before, definitely want to make sure we're vetting the bid packets very well to ensure that it's financially feasible. I think a big difficulty with the rising costs is that it's pushing our conferences farther out from major cities, those being like hubs for transportation, food, entertainment, pre and post conference. So I know hotel cost is a big one. That's a large sink of the money right there. And there have been some ideas to potentially partner with universities to host conference rather than hotels. Of course, might be a controversial idea, but I believe for the financial stability of UNAVSA, if if it's really needed, we may have to move away from hotel conferences just to ensure that we don't run a deficit every single year for the foreseeable future. Other than that, of course, as I mentioned in my previous answer, continue looking for a sponsorship, continually applying for grants. Goals will be our main forms of revenue. I don't want to increase registration prices any more than they have in the past few years. So the biggest focus in terms of financials is likely having the downside conference itself. Of course, conference is what I'm most familiar with. I don't have a lot of familiarity with the financial resources needed for cabinet, but of course I'm willing to figure that out and put that into consideration along with conference and see where our priorities are.
All right, thank you so much for your answer. So moving on still on the topic of conference, should we move away from traveling conference? What are some pros and cons you can foresee from a financial perspective?
Before I answer, can I get a bit of, I guess I have a clarifying question. In terms of traveling conference, is this just meant as, when you say move away from traveling conference, are we considering going to virtual conferences or more just splitting NASA into maybe a few smaller mega region conferences?
I guess like alternatives from like traveling to different cities or like expensive cities um, for conference, making it more accessible financially.
Mhm. Um, I think on that one, a bit difficult. Of course, I had seen a lot of success with the virtual conferences years following the pandemic. So that's definitely an option if you really need to go there. In terms of main conference itself, I know it is a big financial burden that attendees are choosing to take on. Um, in terms of trying to lower or abate the cost of the traveling conference, you'd likely have to look into cities that are located centrally to majority of, or a good large enough portion of our constituency who is actually interested in attending conference. So there's that. We're going to talk about pros and cons. If I talk about pros and cons for a virtual conference, of course, it's going to be much less financial strain on UNAVSA as there's no need for any physical amenities. Main cons would likely just be removing the physical social interaction parts of conference outside of actual programming time. I know some people are starting to get used to the virtual, but personally, I think there's a lot of merit to being together in person, although that's not really pro or con of financials. Um, yeah, that's all I got for that one.
No worries. So kind of moving away from that topic, this is more about your leadership style. So what types of transparency should we expect from you?
Um, Transparency, when it comes to, I guess, BOD and eBoard, of course, I'll let them know what's going on with my life, whether it be personal situations that are taking away from my bandwidth to work on uh, projects of UNAVSA and things of that nature. When it comes to specifically the work as treasurer, um, I'd have to work on the legality of it, but um, I know I want to at least let I just work on some platform that will allow people to kind of see where the money is going, what we're funding, uh, where we're getting the money from, things of that nature. That's like the financial transparency. In terms of just general, I guess, keyboard decisions overall, um, do you know if there are any large changes, decisions made by UNAVSA? I think if it merits a public release, we can do something like that. But I think for the most part, any decisions that we make are that we work towards, we'll be notified. We'll be notifying core and e-board of respective regions to give them some insight and some background info into what's going on in NAFTA.
All right, thank you. So that kind of wraps up some of the questions that the Elections Committee has prepared for you. We're going to kind of now gear towards some of the questions that the constituents have sent in for the town hall in regards to your position specifically. So here's the question. Outside of grants, are there any other forms of revenue that you'll be interested in pursuing? For example, CDs and bonds?
I'm not super familiar with CDs and bonds, but um, in terms of those type of investments, we do need a substantial amount of starting capital in order to utilize those. I don't know UNAVSA's current financial situation, so I can't say for certain either way. But that's definitely something worth looking into if we do have the capital to invest in CDs and bonds or any other things we might look into, while still having the funds to fund conference and cabinet without risking going into the negative. Um, Outside of grants and sponsorships and CDs and bonds, um, I know there are some ideas about maybe doing merch as a way to raise some funds, although that's more on the smaller end. In terms of other revenue streams, still trying to brainstorm ideas, but right now a lot of focus is primarily on that grant writing and um, sponsorships and donations. But CDs and bonds is a nice idea. I'll definitely take a look into that.
All right. Thank you. So we're going to go on to the next question for the audience here. Here we go. What strategies would you implement to ensure the financial sustainability of UNAVSA?
Strategies. Well, of course, I'm not going to talk too much more about grants and sponsorship and that stuff. I'm sure you've heard it all enough already. But of course, including those, and also looking more in depth into where we're spending our money. I know I've done some work in the past, making sure in the past during my time as treasurer for my club in college, making sure that whenever there were requests for items to be purchased for event or whatnot, making sure that whoever's doing the requesting helps find quotes so that we can get the best deal or just compare deals across different vendors, suppliers, and also giving a reason for why we're requesting these funds. So that's kind of one toll gate that we can implement in order to make sure there's not, I guess, I don't want to say frivolous spending, but make sure there's only necessary spending as needed. So that's going to be looking into like things that cabinet needs to purchase and also things that conference staff needs to purchase. Other than that, I think big thing again is conference. Just making sure we vet the bid packet, taking a look at meeting room costs, food and beverage minimums, those numbers, and making sure that those numbers make sense with what registration price you're shooting for and what sponsorship amount you think is realistic to work towards for the year. So.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. We have one more question for time today. The last one is, what experience do you have with grants writing, and how would you leverage the skill to benefit UNAVSA?
When it comes to specifically grant writing, I have a little bit of experience working with my BOD for the New England Intercollegiate DSA, helping them work on grants for Macy's and there's one other one, but I forget the name of. A little bit of experience there, but I also do have a lot of experience in college as treasurer. Not specifically like titled grants, but we would have to make applications in order to fund our events every year. So a lot of that is inputting things like purpose of the event, what we're looking to get out of it, the amount of people we will likely be able to serve with the event, how it'll benefit the community, how it'll help our organization, things like that. So we have some experience writing wordsmithing answers for questions like that. And I think that's a lot of what goes into the grant writing process. Of course, I do have friends, Kristen, current treasurer, Tiffany, the previous treasurer, who have done grant writing. So, of course, I'm always reaching out to my community for any help if there is ever a need for grant writing help there. But overall, I do think I have a lot of experience putting together the answers for questions that grants typically ask for.
All right. Thank you so much, Anthony. And that is all the questions that we have for your candidacy for this year's 2024 elections process. There will be a supplementary questions packet for you that will be provided after. Thank you for all the constituents watching, and of course for you for sharing your vision and fielding questions. This recorded session will be shared out shortly to UNAVSA constituents and voting bodies, and we look forward to the continued elections process at this year's UNAVSA conference and for the final results.